you have to understand what a fragile thing a man is. But now it makes you wonder about something. Because what we've looked at so far tells us, what does it tell us? Well, it tells us that women are smarter than men. They have more energy than men. They have more common sense than men. So why is it that men are still running the world? Now we're going to look at this, and I got an answer for you. And I'm going to tear some of it from today's headlines, and then we're going to have to go back to biblical times for the rest of the solution. Why is it that women find themselves in second place? Let's think about this. What does society do with a successful woman? Society, when a woman is successful, tries to destroy her or ignore her. And I'll get more specific. For the last 10 years on Wall Street, we've watched money men and bag men steal, swindle, swipe, grab, glom, bribe, cajole, take trillions of dollars out of the financial system and bring the world to the edge of financial collapse. When this was being done, the regulators on Wall Street could look out their windows on any given day and see these money men and bag men hauling sacks of ill-gotten money out of the various banks. But what they had to do is they said to themselves, well, we gotta do something. I mean, we gotta give the illusion of caring about this. We have to make an example of someone. So who was it that the regulators, when they searched around, and they said, who's responsible for the complete moral depravity of Wall Street? Who is it that caused this financial Armageddon? Who did they focus on? Who did they blame for the financial collapse? Why, Martha Stewart, of course. And what was her crime? Well, clearly her first crime was that she's a woman. But her second crime was that she misspoke to prosecutors. And her third crime, apparently, was that she had also recommended that it was okay to drink red wine with fish. But you see, this is what happens to women. And to get a deeper explanation of that, I'm going to take us back in time a little bit. And unfortunately, I have to talk about one of the most controversial subjects on the planet. And that subject is religion. Now, of course, everybody knows the two great religions for comedy are Catholicism and Judaism. But there's an unwritten rule in comedy that you can only talk about the religion that you belong to. Now, the problem here is that I'm an Anglican. Now, think about it. You ever heard any great Anglican jokes? Let's make a list of all the great Anglican comics. The problem with being an Anglican, you need controversy for comedy. The problem with being an Anglican is every time we get an issue, a controversial issue, we take it to head office for a ruling, their reaction is, sure, whatever. We want gay marriages, yeah, sure, whatever. We want stem cell research, yeah, sure, whatever. We want to use condoms, yeah, sure, whatever. The other thing that happens in our religion is that the tradition is that if you ever actually disagree with head office, you just start your own church. But I'm going to take you back now to the real explanation as to how women ended up where they are. And we've got to go back to the Garden of Eden. So at the time, Adam and Eve had just arrived in the Garden of Eden. God brought them together, and he explained all the rules of the Garden of Eden. And then he said, go and relax for a while. So they went into the Garden of Eden and enjoyed themselves. And God called a meeting a couple of days later. The two of them came in. Eve, not surprisingly, was totally prepared for the meeting. That morning, she'd done an Excel spreadsheet for crop rotation in the Garden of Eden. She had done a complete balanced diet plan for the next month, balancing all fruits, legumes, and vegetables. And she'd harvested about a half ton of grain so that she could bake bread for the week in case they had guests as well. Not to mention that, she'd run a half marathon. Now, Adam, on the other hand, looked like hell. He was sweating, he was nauseous, he could barely keep his head off the table. Apparently, the night before, Adam discovered how to ferment apples. He'd made himself a nasty batch of wine, had several gallons of wine. He was comatose, he was so drunk. He could barely keep his head off the table. Anyway, God looked at the two of them and he said, today, I need one of you to volunteer for a very important job. It is going to be a spiritual and uplifting job. The job is which one of you is going to bear children. Now, Eve smiles and thinks to herself, this is it. This is the chance for me to assure women's primacy for the rest of time. She jumped up and said, God, on behalf of women today and women for all time, I accept that job. And I must admit, she didn't really need to jump up that fast, because by that time, Adam had passed out and was asleep on the floor. Anyway, Eve spent the next day or so, but she was just thrilled. She was imagining all the statues that were going to be built in her honor and how beloved she would be by women for the rest of time. So they were both a bit surprised when the next day God called another meeting. And this time God was furious. He was absolutely livid. Once again, Eve was ready for the meeting. She was well prepared. Once again, though, Adam looked terrible. His eyes were all bloodshot. He smelled terrible. He looked like he was going to throw up. Apparently, the night before, Adam had smoked just about every weed and vegetable in the Garden of Eden in an attempt to discover cigarettes and dope. Anyway, God said to the two of them, I cannot believe what has happened. When you got here, I told you specifically, no apples and stay out of my apple orchard. Someone, not only have they eaten my apples, but they've taken a chainsaw and hacked down the entire apple orchard. Now at this point, Adam's ears perk up, because despite his weakened condition, he realized this could be a reference to the collateral damage of his winemaking efforts. And he started to get concerned that this actually could land quite badly for him. God said, I want one of you to confess. Well, Eve actually was pretty calm. I mean, she was filing her nails, and she had a bit of a wry grin in her face, because I think at the end of the day, she was going to kind of enjoy watching Adam get his pasting from God. So she was pretty surprised when Adam stood up and said, God, it pains me to do this. It pains me to do this. I wanted to come to you sooner, but I wanted to give Eve a chance to confess. I saw her in the garden. I saw her in the apple orchard. I saw her eating your apples. And what Adam had done is, once he heard what was going on, he had surreptitiously taken an apple out of his pocket and slipped it into Eve's purse. And he said to God, I think if you look in her purse, you will find one of your apples. Well, God snatched Eve's purse away from her, looked in it, and started to scream with rage, Eve, I can't believe you did this. I trusted you. Are Adam and I the only two honest people on the planet? At that point, two angels came and started to drag Eve out of the room. And she was furious. She was screaming all manner of vile and nasty things. And as she was being dragged out, God said to her, Eve, your punishment for this terrible thing that you've done is that labor will no longer be a spiritual and uplifting experience. It's going to be hard labor. And that was eventually shortened to just labor. Eve started threatening Adam with 10 different ways she was going to kill him. And this actually became a tradition in childbirth when women were in labor. For the rest of time, they would scream the most vile and foul things at their mate in remembrance of Adam's treachery. And in churches all over the world, from that day forward, in churches all over the world, the parishioners are served a little bit of wine in remembrance of Adam's quick thinking that ensured that men would never have to bear children. Studies have actually shown that if men were... What's this? Studies have actually... This is a bit weird. Studies have actually shown that if men bore children, epidurals would be administered in the first trimester. The studies show that condoms would be mandatory. The studies show that maternity leave would last for 7 years. The study showed that mood swings and hormones would no longer be a topic for humor.